Welcome to the Soccer Chaplains United podcast from the touchline. And now, here's your host, Rev Brad.
Hey friends, welcome to the podcast. This is the month of May, and traditionally in the month of May, there's an extra emphasis on mental health and mental health awareness. So what I want to do with the podcast for the next few weeks is I want to take a look at 4 distinct stories in the Bible, and I want to talk through what we see in them as it relates to mental health, and then connect that back into sport, connect it into the work that we do, and oftentimes how God meets us in those moments, and how sometimes we just need those things around us to help us get through the mental health issue. So today, what we're going to do is we're going to look at the story of King Saul. King Saul was the first king of Israel. Israel had desired and wanted a king like the other nations, and they went to their priest, Samuel, and they said, give us a king. Other nations have a king, we want a king as well. And Samuel was distressed by this because he knew what would happen with the people wanting and desiring a king. He knew everything that came with that, the taxes and the burden and maybe you have this great leader, but Samuel interpreted that as a rejection of God as king. But the Lord said, hey, look, this is come on the people because I know where they're at, and so let's give them a king. And Saul was the first king of Israel. So we're going to read, I want to read for you a passage, 1 Samuel 16, verses 14 through 23. And this gets at really a time in Saul's life where as a king, he was struggling. He was distressed in his spirit. And what that meant is that affected the way that he led as a king. And I'm going to read this passage and then build in some context of what has happened just before this to kind of give you an idea of why Saul is going through this mentally distressing time. But here's the passage, 1 Samuel 16, starting with verse 14. I'm reading from the NLT. Now the Spirit of the Lord had left Saul, and the Lord sent a tormenting spirit that filled him with depression and fear. Some of Saul's servants said to him, a tormenting spirit from God is troubling you. Let us find a good musician to play the harp whenever the tormenting spirit troubles you. He will play soothing music, and you will soon be well again. All right, Saul said, find me someone who plays well and bring him here. One of the servants said to Saul, one of Jesse's sons from Bethlehem is a talented harp player. Not only that, he's a brave warrior, a man of war, and has good judgment. He is also a fine-looking young man, and the Lord is with him. So Saul sent messengers to Jesse to say, send me your son David, the shepherd. Jesse responded by sending David to Saul, along with a young goat, a donkey loaded with bread, and a wineskin full of wine. So David went to Saul and began serving him. Saul loved David very much, and David became his armor-bearer. Then Saul sent word to Jesse asking, please let David remain in my service, for I am very pleased with him. And whenever the tormenting spirit from God troubled Saul, David would play the harp. Then Saul would feel better, and the tormenting spirit would go away. So we see in this passage that Saul's troubled. Now you might think, as king, as leader, there's a lot to trouble you. You have enemies that appear from nowhere, and battles you have to fight, and decisions to be made about ruling and leadership. You're in a high-pressure, intense position. But we understand a little bit more about Saul's condition if you want to read and study a little bit further from even 1 Samuel 15. And we understand that Saul essentially disobeys God, and God rejects Saul as king, tells him so through the prophet Samuel. If you read 1 Samuel 15, we read in verse 10, then the Lord said to Samuel, I am sorry that I ever made Saul king, for he has not been loyal to me and has refused to obey my command. Samuel was so deeply moved when he heard this that he cried out to the Lord all night. The story goes on to explain why Saul's been rejected by God, but essentially Saul disobeyed the Lord's commands. He wasn't a very good king. And you'd think starting out, he might have done a little bit better, but he actually failed God and disobeyed. So what Samuel does is Samuel has to kind of be the go-between with Saul, but after this moment, he doesn't hang around Saul anymore. He doesn't go to him. And so Saul's tormented. Essentially, he knows that he's been rejected by God, and he knows that at some point, the kingdom, the end, will come. He just doesn't know when. And I think that leads to sort of these cycles of depression and fear that Saul feels, and feels very acutely. And that's perhaps why, too, David enters into the service. Now, there's a couple things to be said about David. One, we see from the comment from one of Saul's servants. He says, look, the Lord is with him. And also, he's a good harp player. So music, he's great at this. And maybe that music will comfort you, soothe you, and put you at ease. Now, a couple lessons that I want to say out of this that I think apply into our lives, whether you're a footballer, whether you're an executive, whether you're a chaplain, it doesn't really matter, no matter your vocation. But I think that's something that we have to track with in terms of our mental and spiritual health, is that we have to look at the items, the things around our environment. Now, I say that with understanding as well. Saul had disobeyed God, and his attempts to make things right, although they were kind of there, you can read those in 1 Samuel 15, were they really heartfelt? Were they really things that were going to bring about true change? I don't know that Saul was super repentant. And again, Saul had been rejected because of his disobedience to God. So that sets for us a little bit of the framework of Saul's mental state. But if we look at it, I think what's really interesting is that as we look at David's time spent with Saul, God gives Saul, even though he's rejected him, he does give him relief from the torment, the depression, the fear that he feels, the anxiety that he feels by, David's playing and David's presence. I think a lesson for us to learn, one, don't disobey God. If God gives a command, if God has a calling on your life, my life, we need to obey that. We need to obey that to the best of our ability. But here's the thing. When we fail, not if, but when we fail those things, we need to realize that God in his grace still gives us ways to be comforted in the midst of the pain, the struggle, the fear, the depression that we might feel around that failure, around those moments when we have a distressed spirit. And I think a lot of it has to do with asking questions around, what does our environment look like? What kind of music do we listen to? What kind of company do we keep? Who are the people that are around us speaking into our lives? I know for myself, I tend to be very melancholy. I sometimes have to remind myself, look, you got to come in with some joy today, because it's not all gloom and doom. And that's sometimes a challenge in my personality, because of the way that I view the world, the way that I interact with the world is I see a world in trouble, and a world that I need to help, work towards very strongly to help. So sometimes it's very difficult for me to relax, to feel at ease, and to just enjoy myself or enjoy the time, the company around people. And so I have to work, sometimes it feels like, a little extra hard to get into that place and position where I can receive those things. And once I do, once I feel at ease, once the stress and burden of this world are relaxed a bit, or I can take some time off from my work to save the world, and I say that with air quotes, then I can, as I'm relaxed, I can have fun. I can take joy. And so, we all go through some of these cycles of distress and relief, and it may come around the bills that we have to pay. It may come around the diagnosis that we receive. It could come around the way that our job is going, the way our performance is viewed or not viewed. We all experience these cycles. And at times, we need God's grace in our life to give us a little bit of relief, to to ease us from these things. And so whether you're an elite athlete and you're performing at a high level, especially in soccer, recently my club team, the Rapids, played in front of 75,000 fans against one of the greatest, if not the greatest, football player of all time, Lionel Messi. So a lot of pressure, a lot of moment where, do we shine? Do we struggle? And part of my encouragement was, guys, enjoy this moment, because it's really rare. It's really rare to play here in our U.S. context in front of that many fans. And it's really rare that you'll ever get this opportunity again to play against one of the greatest in the game of all time. How do we enjoy those things? There can be a lot of stress. There can be a lot of distress if we're injured, or if we're going through something, if we're in a contract year and we have to perform, and the performances aren't coming, the appearances aren't coming, we can feel an overload of stress. What does God do, though, to enter into that space and give us relief? I know at different times and different moments for athletes, the ability to pick up a set of golf clubs or play a different game, to read, to relax, to chill by the pool, or whatever the thing is, there can be these spaces where our mental health, our spiritual health gets a sense of relief. It gets a sense of care. And so I just want to encourage you, if you're listening today and you're thinking through, look at your environment. Again, what are the things that you're doing to infuse life, to infuse self-care, to have and surround yourself with others around you? Because as an elite athlete, as a high performer, we are not immune from the depression, from the stress of the high-performing environment that we work or serve in. And oftentimes, when we go through an intense period, whether we have 3 games a week for multiple weeks in a row, whether we're playing the GOAT, the greatest of all time, in a game in front of 75,000 fans, in those high-pressure moments, when we come off and come down from those things, we can experience a bit of distress and a heavy load. And so we have to realize that God in those moments cares for us. And I think it's such a beautiful thing here in the story of 1 Samuel 16, as we see David starting to emerge in his kingship, and we see Saul starting to decline in his own. God is still gracious with Saul. God still gives Saul relief. And in a couple of things, God is at work in this story. And I find it a grace for both David and for both Saul. Well, where are you today? I'm just wondering where you are with your mental health, with your emotional health and well-being, with your spiritual health. It doesn't matter which league that you're playing in. Maybe you're in Major League Soccer, maybe you're in the USL, maybe you're in the NWSL, or another one of our leagues here in the US or elsewhere as you're listening to this. There are resources for helping you. And I just want to encourage you, sometimes it may feel difficult to reach out. Hopefully there's a team chaplain that you can confide in. Maybe there's some resources directly within the club, or there's some resources within the league. A lot of player associations have mental health resources. For example, Major League Soccer has a confidential hotline, the number 877-657-0090. And you can get a phone call in there if you're an MLS player and receive counseling or other dedicated player support that you might need. Sometimes the challenge is in reaching out and asking for help. And we see that even in Saul's story here. We see that it's Saul's servants who say, hey, look, here's our suggestion. Let's work on your environment. Let's work on bringing a person of peace who can play some music and help you chill out in these moments of stress, in these moments when your spirit is being tormented with everything going on. So maybe I'm that person for you, saying, look, hey, I just want to encourage you, maybe for your league, you've got some resources that you haven't tapped into. Maybe you just need to Google those things and find out what are the numbers, what are the resources that I have. Maybe it's in reaching out to a chaplain that is working with the team. If you're not comfortable with the chaplain or you don't have a chaplain, maybe there's a player support or care person that is working with the club. And again, you can go to them hopefully and feel like you can trust them, that they will hold whatever space confidentially for you. And I know it can be a struggle. Sometimes the motivation to get out and to let someone know about the struggle that you're sensing or feeling or going through can be a challenge. But friend, I want to encourage you to do that today. And I want to encourage you to take an assessment of your environment. What are the ways that you're infusing life back into yourself? And if you find yourself going home after a training day and dimming the lights, putting on a video game and ordering in food, I don't know that's the healthiest for your mental state and well-being. So I want to encourage you this month of May to really reach out, to really start to grow in some other things. Maybe it's picking up some piano lessons or guitar lessons. Maybe it's doing a new thing. Maybe it's listening to a different podcast, a new podcast, listening to this podcast. Whatever that is, I just want to encourage you to work on the environment that can help your mental and spiritual health. Well, friends, that wraps it up for me today. Again, we're going to come back next week and talk a little bit more about mental health and some of the things that we can do to help our mental and spiritual health be strong so that we can make it through the different highs and lows of a season, through a chapter in life that might be difficult for us. Thanks again for listening. This has been Rev Brad coming to you from the Touchline.